Fuck it. Oh, we're live. Hey, everyone. Welcome to SPSM Chat. SPSM, suicide. Stop laughing. Suicide prevention. This is suicide we're talking about. Suicide. Be sad, okay? Be sad. Suicide prevention, social media. What that all means, I don't know. But we're talking about Dungeons, Dragons, Autistic Youth, other things, because this is not just about me. This is not just about our expert guests. This is not just about our co-hosts. This is about all of you. And so let me make sure that I'm pinning this to the top of the profile. And so we want to hear from you. So if you have opinions, and I know you do, especially if you are hashtag actually autistic, let us know that you're here. Let us know that you give a shit, because this is SPSM, and you already know, if it's Sunday, it's SPSM Chat. Without further ado, let's go on to our first co-host, and that is Marie.
Hello, hello, hello. We are on tonight with me. I started this like it's my own show. Hi, everyone. It's Anxiety.
It will be soon.
No. Hi. I'm really zoomed in too. Okay. So my name is Marie, better known as Anxiety. I'm a mental health live talk show host on Mixer. I'm also a writer. And so on my show, we're either interviewing professionals, talking to people who have lived through mental health issues themselves, or just talking about a mental health topic that I have researched using my background in mental health, in medical editing, program management, and research. Yep, I know what I do. Go on, next person, please.
What level dungeon master are you, Marie?
Unfortunately, like literally one. I attempted to make one game, and my friends didn't enjoy it. So I'm happy you brought it up. Now we're talking about it.
Something tells me that someone's going to be a higher level than you on this panel.
It might be. I have suspicions.
And speaking of Marie, sorry, Joelle. Speaking of Marie, we are on Mixer, mixer.com/SPSM Chat. So Marie will be giving us an update on that front. So if you have comments, don't feel left out on Mixer, because we're going to start building up that channel. We're going to start doing more content that you can only see on Mixer. You heard it first, okay? Let's go on to our next co-host, Joelle.
Hi, my name is Joelle Murray. I am a peer specialist and mental health consultant of some sort. And I am autistic. I was diagnosed in my late teens, though, so my experience of being an autistic youth is a little bit different than somebody who was diagnosed when they were a kid. But still, I was autistic as a youth, so I have that experience. Anyway, hi, I'm excited about this conversation.
Yes, and quick shout outs on Facebook. Hey, Amy Garot, who's an amazing person. So I appreciate that's high praise coming from you. And hey, Danielle, who is a co-host who will be on next week. So you are beautiful too, Danielle. So let's go to Hudson.
Hello, my name is Hudson at Mental Strategy. I am a behavioral health systems designer and longtime nerd. I was a half-elf wizard. I also played a druid for a while, which I really loved, probably the most out of all of it. And I'm really excited to talk about D&D. As some of you may remember, I love the video game aspects of what we do, so I'm very excited to be here.
So before we get into our expert guest, since we're doing Twitter handles, what is your Twitter handle, Joelle?
The last.
And what can we expect? What kind of content can we expect on that Twitter account?
Sass.
Actually, autistic content, but also
are these leading questions?
I don't know. But like, generally, I bitch and moan about people sucking, and taking away like rights and agency from other people. That's pretty much what I do all across the board. So,
without further ado,
but go ahead.
Without further ado,
feeling about this one.
Tell the whole world, the whole SPSM Chat universe, galaxy, if you're into D&D, I guess, dungeon, the SPSM Chat dungeon, who is Dr. B?
Well, Dr. B is a complicated soul, born at a very young age. And I can no. So I'm Dr. B, Rafael Bocamatzo, and now for all those of you who can see my name on the screen, you now know why I got handed the nickname Dr. B a long time ago. I'm a doctor of clinical psychology. I used to have a private practice in the Seattle area, but I don't anymore because I'm the clinical director of the very first mental health nonprofit to serve the game community called Take This, which was founded in 2012. Unfortunately, under well, like good origin stories, there was a tragedy. But since then, we have been a pioneering force in destigmatizing mental health challenges within the game industry and the game community. And in addition to that, I'm a published author, just had a chapter published in a wonderful textbook called Press Start. I explored resilience through the lens of video game analogy. And I am a trainer on the applied use of role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. I think that's the quickest version. I do a lot every time I try and do a bio. I like, oh really? I do that too. Wow.
What does the B stand for?
Well, it depends on the day. I think today, given I haven't shaved as much, the B stands for beard.
So
sometimes it's bow tie, to be clear on the other option.
I've got one within reach. I've got several within reach.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we can wait. Okay, so
I mean, do you want me to give lessons on like how to tie bow ties on the air?
That is suicide prevention.
That sounds like Mixer exclusive content. I like the cut of your jib, young man. So
Rudy,
let's get.
You can't take my catchphrase, Rudy.
The cut of your jib.
That is mine.
Okay, we're gonna have to fight for it then. So, but let's get into question number one, because I know that we're gonna have a lot to say this week. So, question number one: why is it important for autistic youth to engage freely in special interests? And we'll go to Dr. B. And since the name of the show is Dungeons and Dragons and Autistic Youth, let's just start. We're talking about special interests, so let's go with Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, I mean, I can go with that one since it's one of my special interests. One of the things I didn't mention in my introduction is I'm an autism advocate because I'm autistic. And Dungeons and Dragons just happens to be one of my special interests. But there's the whole thing about engaging in one's special interests is it's relaxing. It is focusing. And for a lot of folks on the autism spectrum, it actually helps mitigate the stresses of navigating a world that really isn't built for us. We're outnumbered roughly 50-1 by neurotypical people. And the world is not really made for us, especially those of us who have the double-edged sword of being able to mask as, normal, and I have a love-hate relationship with that word, but the ability to engage in these special interests, especially if they are community focused or they're with other people, is it also can provide a sense of inclusion. It can provide a sense of competence, and it can provide a sense of purpose, all of which are helpful for anyone in terms of resilience. So it also has the added benefit of, for a lot of folks on the autism spectrum, being a calming agent and a focusing agent when we are stressed out beyond belief by the things, our sensory idiosyncrasies, the constant bombardment of everything in the world.
Joelle, do you have thoughts? I'm sorry. I know you have thoughts with Joelle, but let's go to Marie first. I don't want to mess with the order.
Well, that's good because I have no thoughts, and I'd like to go to Joelle.
Joelle, you have thoughts?
Yes, I have thoughts.
Smoke them if you got them.
Why is it important for autistic youth to engage freely in special interests? Okay, it helps me to repeat the question. So definitely a lot of what Dr. B said, it helps kind of to deal with, it has a calming effect. For me as a kid, I was super interested in the Titanic, which is apparently that's a common thing, but super interested in the Titanic. And like, I would look at diagrams of the ship and like how it sank and like, you know, ways that people wanted to try and like resurrect it and things like that. And stories of like stories of what might have happened and like structural integrity and shit like that. And it was just like really interesting for me. But then I moved on and I got interested in things like DNA. I got really interested in the brain and I got really interested in how bodies worked. And that all sounds like very boring, but for me, it was very calming. And it gave me a chance to like take all this extra stuff that was like constantly bombarding my brain and like filter it into these things that are very interesting and intricate for me, because pretty much anything you are super interested in, you can find more and more detail. So I just kind of poured like all the extra stress and like the over sensory shit into that. And it also helped me to like sometimes use it as a structure to figure out social shit that was going on. And I don't know how to explain that, but I would think of stuff that like I encountered and like calm down and be able to like analyze like what the fuck did I do wrong here. And so yeah, that's why it's really important to let kids and adults have their special interests. And it can really be applied to a lot of other things. Like a lot of the knowledge you find in special interests is pretty amazing.
I am so sorry, Joelle. I forgot to ask you, what dungeon master level are you?
That would be like a -3, Rudy.
Cool. We'll take it to our resident dungeon supermaster, to Hudson. Wait, did we already establish
He's
what
muted.
level?
Wait,
Did we already establish what level Dr. B was? I want to know.
No.
I want to know the
Dr. B and
hierarchy.
I side by side.
No, we can't do that. But I just want to know what level. What level are you on, Hudson? Again, I want to know the hierarchy.
I actually never got to Dungeon Master. I was always a participant. Very first campaign I ever did was a Baldur's Gate one. Yeah.
So let's just say Dr. B. Okay, so it's your turn. Let's put the question up on again. So just for everyone's sake.
So I'm working with this with my little right now. I think, at least for my kid, he can be good at a lot of things, but he can get overwhelmed and easily frustrated with things. And what I found is that by encouraging specialization into, you know, dinosaurs or, you know, Legos or whatever, it gives him an area that he knows he's good at, and it gives him an area that you can't take that away. And so like we've tried a lot of different things that didn't always work, but the things that he's good at, he's really good at, and it helps give him confidence to talk about what he likes. So when he gets nervous, he can talk about something he's specialized in. So it helps him feel like he can be a part of things and contribute.
Good. I love how obsessed I am with dungeon master levels, or just.
Oh, wait, Dr. B, go like this. You have this.
Oh, he has the eyebrow down. There it is. Yeah.
Just levels, period. Okay, so
you are my eyebrow equal. I like this. Can you move your ears?
Yeah. So quick
with you, Rudy.
Yes. Quick shout out to Jeff Vader, who finds something funny on this show. There's nothing funny about suicide, okay? Don't laugh.
The first words out of your mouth were "fuck it."
Don't laugh. Okay. Andrea, who wants to be on our show. Okay, if you want to be on the show, and there's an episode right before World Bipolar Day, I'm going to quiz you, okay? I'm going to ask you what we discussed at the 50-minute mark. That'll let me know that you actually care about this show. So be on the lookout for that, Andrea Paquette from Canada. Okay. So Danielle says wiggly eyebrows are fantastic. Do we have any comments on Mixer yet? That's totally fine if not.
Just questioning who Dr. B, why Dr. B is Dr. B, and that was answered, so I think we're good.
Cool. Question number 2, and that would be, what are the potential positives and negatives of quote-unquote masking? And we talked about that a little, that term masking. Autistic traits when interacting with people who are not autistic. Take it away, Dr. B.
Okay, well, I have a somewhat nuanced perspective on this, because there are a lot of folks who were raised in an era where we have an increasing understanding of what autism is and what it isn't. And for the longest time, therapies for folks on the autism spectrum were designed to make us, again, normal and blend in. And there's a history of some really abhorrent practices that thankfully are slowly being rectified. And the perspective for a lot of treatment providers is shifting from curative to functional. And so instead of looking at autism as a bad thing, the way I like to look at it is I'm on a different operating system than the rest of y'all. I mean, it's as simple as that. I'm Linux in a Windows world. And the simple fact is that I am outnumbered. I think, or another analogy I like to use is I'm speaking a different language in another country. I'm an alien amongst you. Now, I think it's my personal responsibility to adapt, to speak the language that everyone understands as best I can. And that's a very personal moment-to-moment thing. I want to speak the native language around me, but that wears. And more research is finding out that when we train people who are on the autism spectrum to constantly mask and even find shame in the fact that they just operate differently, that's when we start to see some really negative long-term outcomes. Now, being able to speak the language, as another autistic friend of mine puts it, I'm almost fluent in neurotypical, but I have a heavy accent. It allows me to help bridge the gap a little bit better. And I do have to sort of mask some of my own quirks temporarily in order to get people to listen. So the advantage is I can navigate through the world a little bit more easily. The downside to being able to mask, as well as that I do, and I've got other friends who say the same thing. The downside to that is, one, it takes so much effort. Oh my God, it's so exhausting. It is so exhausting. And another downside is a shame, of feeling weird, of feeling like I don't belong, of feeling left out, isolated, which I did for a long time until I got my diagnosis, and then things got better. But there's another sort of insidious downside, and that's the fact that when I'm as good at speaking the language of the people around me, at least on a short-term basis, people don't believe me. People don't believe I'm autistic until they really get to know me and they really see it coming out. And so it becomes a double-edged sword that they expect me to go through the world like Rain Man. And, on my saucier days, I'll tell them, if you want that, drop toothpicks, I'll count them. I'll count them wrong, but I'll count them if it makes you feel better. But yeah, there's the shorter version is, the upside is I can communicate with people a little bit more freely, but the downside is, God, it wears on you so much.
Now, the real question is, Dr. B, are you Mint Linux or are you Ubuntu?
Those are words. I'm certain of it. I understand that you strung syllables together in a way that makes sense to you.
I wish I had a crickets button for that.
Awesome. I personally like to think that I'm free BSD. Let's go to Marie.
That sounds painful.
We'll discuss that after hours.
Can I have the question? You know what? Actually, I really want to, again, where I'm in a position here where I want to make sure that the people with lived experience have a chance to give their voice, and I'm really here for emotional support of the whole thing. So I think we should go to Joelle.
I do want to say, Marie, that I am glad that you're joining us. I know it was a little touch and go, but it's always great to see your face, and I'm so glad that you're a part of our SPSM team.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I see the Twitter chat blowing up now, so I will circle back to you after we're done with Hudson. So worry not, all of you on Twitter, and everyone keep the comments going on Facebook, YouTube, and Mixer as well. I see Danielle. She's on multiple platforms. She's amazing. Can't wait to see you again next week. So let's take it to Joelle.
What are the potential positives and negatives of masking autistic traits when interfacing with people who are not autistic? So I do think there's a difference between masking and having an understanding of how to adapt to certain social situations. And I think that's also an important aspect of the conversation. So like kind of what Dr. B was saying is that, masking is something that we've been taught is like necessary. It's been inflicted upon us, that like, we can't be functional. We can't be accepted. We can't be valued unless we imitate people who are not us. And that's incredibly harmful. In fact, so Sarah Cassidy et al., Simon Baron-Cohen, someone else, came out with a study in 2018 about autistics and risk markers for suicidality, and actually camouflaging was one of the significant ones, camouflaging, masking. So that tells you how it's pretty harmful. But, kind of learning to a degree what something means when somebody who's not autistic is saying something, or certain body language, things like that, or at least how to navigate that situation in a way that doesn't produce shame and that encourages accurate communication is great. And that's not masking, that's adaptation, and that's figuring out how to navigate in the world and function. And that's great. That's what we should be doing. That's what we should be encouraging on both sides. And I think, another problem with masking is that not only does it feel forced, but it's often like, sometimes it's a reflex. Like I try to not do it so much, and I benefited from having an interesting group of friends in high school who really helped me be a little more myself. But masking can be a reflex for like survival mode, for protection. And that's not great when you're constantly in that mode either. It feels like a trauma.
I'm so glad we're talking about autism finally. This is like catnip to Joelle. So but seriously, it's always good when we have a topic where one or more of the co-hosts are just like, I got this, I'm going to attack this. So that's awesome. So let's take it to Hudson, and then we'll take it to Twitter.
So I do not have lived experience. I have a son with some sensory processing disorders, and we're now 6 months working into his autism evaluation and diagnosis. And we did, a year and a half evaluations before that to figure out what's going on. And so for me, all of my experience comes from the parental side. And I've really tried to build a way that he has to go into the real world, to his school, to his friends, where they don't get him, and they won't always get him. And so I work with him on like how to speak that language. But then as a dad, what I've done is I've really worked hard to try and recognize when he's trying and when he's really burning that battery to try and make something work, to try and mask so that he can, fit in and get that. And then when he is done, or I can tell he's done, I start to talk to him about, what does your body feel like? Where, how does your head feel? And like, I try and tie that to say, that feeling of tiredness or that feeling of exhaustion, that just means you need to recharge. And then I work with him on like, how do I recharge? And it's really interesting, like to try and help him navigate to get both. And so like, I don't know enough about the outcomes of masking, but I can say that from a parent standpoint, when he does it too much, he's just sad. I mean, he just gets destroyed and angry. And so he has to be able to express both sides of that, both, you know, the world where he's in a classroom, and then also being able to come home and, you know, dive in. Like, he's been downloading videos to watch about dinosaurs, and he wants to be a paleontologist for the Air Force. No idea where this came from, but like, he is obsessed right now with learning as much about dinosaurs as he can. Like, he can say paleontologist at 5 years old, which is more than I can at 38. But like, it's helping him kind of figure out how to recognize those needs to challenge or to charge and not mask.
Let's take it to Twitter. So okay, so great comments over here. Let's go back to question number 1. So hey Krista, how are you? I appreciate you, who's running our back end as the producer. So Danielle, awesome. Just finishing up schoolwork. That's totally fine. If you want to skip schoolwork to watch SPSM Chat, I know people who do it. Yes. If you want to ignore your family to watch SPSM Chat, don't worry, they'll forgive you in the long run. Okay.
Dr. B has disclaimers.
Yes. So Rachel says, in response to question number 1, giving autistic youth opportunity to engage in special interests gives them an outlet for self-expression and an opportunity to make connections with others who have shared interests and create community. Rachel also says, I also really like the perspective you all share about the calming effects of special interest and how engagement helps with coping and processing. Thanks for sharing. Ooh, a hashtag SW5602. I'm intrigued. Jess Stolman-Rainey, who is a previous guest and probably future guest, says, can't play on SPSM tonight, but I love D&D. And let's talk about this, Jess. Can't make it tonight? What's more important than this? Is it your dog? Is it your husband? Is it something else that we need to talk about? There's no excuse, Jess Stolman-Rainey. Okay? Come back to the fold. This is your blanket. This is your blanket, Jess. Okay?
What is happening right now?
Yeah, I don't know.
Jeanette Tolson says it's important because for much of the time they are instead having to fit into a world that isn't built for them. This takes a lot of effort and can be balanced out with activities that are recharging. Hello, Hudson. I appreciate the multitasking. Misty Gomez. Hello, Misty. I believe this is your first time that I'm seeing you on the chat. Another social worker, I'm assuming. It's important for autistic youth to find their community and create their own unique hobbies with friends. This also allows them to expand their interests and aids in their development. Rachel, to answer to question number 2 about the masking, I think masking allows individuals with autism to unfortunately avoid stigma, however negatively impacts by not allowing them to be their authentic selves. One of you, let me know what that hashtag means, the SW5602. I'm obsessed. Misty Gomez also says positive to masking. It reassures that there is no prejudice on the basis of a person being autistic. Negative. Masking hides the person for who they are rather than allowing them to embrace their individuality. Their complexities are ignored instead of acknowledged. Krista says, I skip homework and ignore my family. See, that is the right answer, Krista Marie. More people need to be like you. If they're not, they're in the wrong. Am I correct, Krista? Tweet hashtag SPSM if you agree. It's question number 3, and it is a doozy.
I see Joelle raising her hand.
Okay. Is it response to masking, Joelle?
Yes.
Okay. Let's hear it.
So I just want to say about masking too, what Hudson brought up, talking to his son about when he's upset, like what he's feeling physically. And that's actually really, really important. I mean, it's kind of straddling like masking and dealing with the consequences of that. That's really, really important because, you know, there's a lot of autistics who have some degree of issues connecting with their body and how that feels and connecting that with an emotional state. And like, actually a lot of people have that issue, but there are a lot of autistics that have that to a larger degree, and it has to do with like the sensory issues and things like that. And like when I was a little kid, and I'd have what I know now are meltdowns, it would be a very physical and frightening experience. And I wish that I would have had someone like Hudson to talk to me about what is that feeling like physically, like how can we How can we deal with that? You know, what is it feeling like when you're getting upset? What does that feel like in your head and your body? Things like that. And that's really important thing to just note.
Question number 3, and it is a doozy, and that would be, are there some aspects, and I'm personally proud of myself from being able to fit this all on the graphic, are there some aspects of an autistic individual's experience that could potentially lead to suicidality? What say you, Dr. B?
Absolutely. Isolation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so I was diagnosed at 35. And, you know, prior to that, it was actually ironic. I should have seen it coming that when I was actually designing a life skills program for young adults on the autism spectrum, I was really drawing from my own experiences to teach them material. And it never dawned on me that, you know, here I am using my own life to give them some skills, lessons I had learned. And it, prior to my diagnosis, I really struggled with chronic depression because I never fit in. You know, a lot of the things I do aren't very typical for, cis hetero white dude. What's the stereotype? I don't really engage in sports that much. I don't like socializing with large groups of people, and my interests are somewhat idiosyncratic. And subsequently, I felt fairly isolated in high school, extremely isolated in high school, in middle school and elementary school, and even in college. And that sense of isolation, that sense of feeling different and not being able to connect with people led to predictable bouts of major depression. Once I understood a little bit better, and once the people around me understood a little bit better, basically going back to the operating system analogy, I got a manual for how my brain works. They did too. Once we were able to understand how I be in the world, and that I'm not broken, I'm just operating differently, then I was able to connect with my family, with my friends a little bit more authentically, reasonably. I started to understand my limits. I understood that something Joelle mentioned, the technical term being alexithymia, an inability to distinguish internal states. I deal with that, and especially when emotions are, for lack of a better term, just loud. I can't tell you what I'm feeling. It's just loud. But all of those things put together just made me feel so isolated as a kid and even as a young adult. And that isolation is a risk factor for anyone, not just people on the autism spectrum. So that's a huge thing. It's not the autism itself that can lead to suicidal risk. It's the secondary stuff.
All right, let's take it to Marie. I think I know your response, but let's hear it anyway.
You will hear it, and that is Joelle has better things to say than I do.
I like your plant in the background, by the way, Marie.
Thank you. Jules Fern says hello.
Joelle, take it away.
Are there some, I don't have the right question, but I know the question. Yeah, okay. No, that's the question. Yeah, so I definitely have to agree what Dr. B said about it's not being autistic, it's having everything around it and like navigating the world being autistic and people responding to you being autistic. And for me, a lot of it was, I don't know how differently the world would have responded to me as a small child, knowing that I was autistic, but basically I felt very, very strong things. And I felt at the time helpless to deal with these strong things. I didn't know how to label them and I didn't know how to communicate them. And it was scary. And so I was experiencing that. And I was told I was bad for going through these scary things. And like, so that meant that I was 6 years old and kind of wanted to die. And like, I'm smiling because I'm weird and that's how I deal with things that are uncomfortable. But that's bad. It was more that I was dealing with these scary things and had nobody to acknowledge like the fear and difficulty that I'm going through. And I couldn't talk to people about it. I was just a bad kid. And I wasn't a bad kid. I wanted to be a good kid. It's like I just got upset and I had no way to control that. But telling me to just stop being upset didn't help. It made me feel worse. It made me feel awful. And other things like, you know, like was mentioned, alienation, just simply not being understood by people around me because they wanted to tell me what I was feeling. Like misinterpreting things without giving me a chance to explain. Like I would get in trouble in school because the constant interpretation was that I was a bad kid, not that I totally misunderstood instructions. And so, like Dr. B said, like once I had this understanding of being autistic, and like brains are now definitely a special interest of mine and kind of social interactions are. So like take that as however you will, but it really helps to like see the difference in how I interact and how people normally interact and how autistics tend to interact. And it actually does really help quite a bit. But also, you know, a lot of it comes back to suppression also, and not being believed. So I was diagnosed at 19, and it got so bad with people not believing me that I just rejected it. And I basically had to be re-diagnosed because people just didn't believe me because I'd been masking for so long. And like, maybe I was just a weird drama chick or something like that. And that was really incredibly painful. So all those things have definitely contributed to me feeling suicidal. And just also like environmental stimulation and feeling overwhelmed and not being acceptable, quote unquote, to deal with that. Like being overwhelmed by noises and not being acceptable to be scared by that, or like, or cover my ears or protect myself from that. Like that made me wrong or stupid or bad. All those things. But actually being autistic, I like my brain and I like who I am. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, I'm done.
Hudson, are you ready?
I am. I just want to echo something that you said, Joelle. I remember the very first time, you choked me up a little bit about the ears and the loudness. I remember the very first time that I put noise canceling headphones on Anders. And he smiled so big, like it was like a Thanksgiving thing. It was a lot of people, and it was magic. I mean, it was so neat to see him. I don't know. It was incredible. Like he had the ability to mute a channel, and that helped his brain process. As far as the question, you know, I'm not a mental health professional, or not a clinical professional. I work on design side, and so I read obsessively about all of this stuff. And I think the Joiner's interpersonal theory of suicide has always been the one that made the most sense of me when I've struggled the most with suicidal thoughts, or I've talked with friends who've been there. That one always seemed to be the one that fit. And you know, if you look at what it is, you know, it's, you know, acquired means, which isn't really my point, but perceived burdensomeness and low belonging, perceived social alienation. And seeing my own son go through that, how could it not? Like, of course it does.
Okay, so Marie, how are we doing on Mixer?
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Joelle and Dr. B, for sharing your experiences and being so open about something that you've been told for so many years is not okay to be open about. That is so much a part of you, and allowing us this insight. it's always incredible when I hear you guys talk about your experience, but it's, you know, the setting and everything. So just thank you. And we had somebody open up on Mixer as well. Sweet Justice says, I think regarding suicidality, I think being repeatedly misunderstood is a risk factor because it leads to isolation, kind of echoing what Dr. B said, in my experience anyway. I think it's other people's response to autism, especially when they don't understand it, and not being diagnosed in the first place doesn't help. And when Joelle started talking, she said, I feel this deep in my soul. People really don't get that it's a spectrum. And then she talked about the fact that her misophonia is triggered with women wearing high heels, which is interesting.
Well, thank you everyone on Mixer. I really appreciate you. If you really like this content, please let us know by following the SPSM Chat account. That would be awesome. And so let's go to some comments on social media before we go to Twitter. So hope I'm getting this right. September 13th, Silti says, hi, SPSM, says that they're ignoring sleep to follow us folks from Norway. How are you doing? I'm watching on Periscope. How are you doing? Jamshid, I appreciate you as well. Danielle Glick says, I did a presentation on alexithymia in my master's program. Totally spelled it wrong. That's totally fine. Danielle also says, wiggly eyebrows are fantastic. And Dr. B is cool. And let's see what's going on Twitter. I hear that's the place to be. I hear that's where all the cool kids are. We got people already responding to question number 4. Good for you all.
We are behind.
Well, dude, we're doing better than last week. Let's just say that.
Oh my God, yeah.
So Misty, in response to question number 3, says, if their experience include isolation, bullying, lack of support, or a negative environment at home, school, this can potentially lead to depression and suicidal ideation. And Jeanette, one of our MVPs, says having to mask too often without being able to engage in enjoyable activities can lead to depression and hopelessness, that things will ever be different. And Rachel says, I thank her for joining us this week, says the isolation and feelings overwhelmed can definitely lead to depression and suicidality as people with autism try to process the world. And again, Krista's skipping homework and ignoring her family for SPSM Chat. Ask yourself out there in SPSM land, what are you ignoring to enjoy this show tonight? Use the hashtag SPSM in all your tweets and join us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as well. You can watch all past episodes on spsmchat.com whenever I get to finally updating the website. Question number 4. The final question before we get into final thoughts, and that would be, what has been your experience with autistic youth? Hey, that sounds like a good topic for a show. And what ways can we support them better? Let's go back to Dr. B.
Well, I mean, let's start with finally killing off the idea of curative treatments. Okay. I'm leaning heavily on the operating system analogy, I realize, but it works on so many levels because, an operating system is neither inherently good nor inherently bad. It just works a certain way, in the same way that, if I got to fix a sink after I get off with y'all, my drill is no better or worse than my hammer. It just depends on the situation. And so I really want to see not only more mental health professionals, but autism, especially the old school autism advocacy groups. Let's get rid of the archaic curative notions and let's focus on functionality. Let's focus on helping to bridge the communication gaps, because that's really what it's all about. Focus on enhancing the strengths that are there and supporting any functional gaps. Learn skills. But additionally, there's also the flip side to this. The people, I would really like other people around us, the autistic community, to realize we're not broken. We're really not. And to just understand that we're just speaking a different language. That's all. Don't ostracize us for being weird. That's one of the most horrible experiences, honestly. Anytime I talk to someone, and Em knows me fairly well, I'm eccentric beyond belief. we heard we heard we heard mention of being a weird theater kid. Well, yeah, I was definitely a weird theater kid, but being confronted with someone who just straight up asks when you meet them, "Why are you so freaking weird?"
Oh.
That is just one of the most heartbreaking, aggravating experiences that someone on the spectrum can experience, because it just, in so few words, encapsulates all of the negativity, all of the shame, all of the isolation. And so I love building groups with autistic youth so they can be around each other, and they can they can be around each other in an environment that accepts their quirks. All the different ones. We had, in one of my former groups, we had some kids who had some real extreme reactivity to auditory, stimulation. So we work with them, which got interesting when we had kids who couldn't regulate their volume. But building in bridges and showing them how to do that, working with families to do the same, working with schools to do the same, building those bridges, I think, is what's going to help the autism community feel more connected. That's going to be the support. Don't cure, help bridge.
What say you, Marie?
So I actually do have some words for this one.
Yay!
I hope I'm still allowed to talk, just because I've passed
Anytime.
So I don't talk about this often, and I don't know that I'll ever talk about it again. But because I don't really have any contact with my family any longer. But my half sister is on the spectrum, and my parents acted like she wasn't. And in the house, like outside of the home, there was consistent conversation. Like I would get glimpses here and there of her, as I was younger, I didn't understand exactly what was going on, but I would get a glimpse here and there that consistently school, like people at the schools that my sister was going through, first elementary and then middle school, were talking about trying to get her, different help or like additional assistance. And my parents were like just adamant about the fact that she was totally fine, and she wasn't. And she ended up being very violent, and it's awful, and it's a terrible. It broke apart, and I'm not saying she did. The way that it was handled was one of the reasons that the family broke apart the way it did, and is not in good shape to this day. And I remember at one point talking to her and her telling me that she's like, "You're the only person that I feel like I can be myself with." And I remember my heart breaking over that. And I didn't understand what that meant as a 16-year-old, but as a 29-year-old, I'm very, and now like in the mental health advocacy sphere, I'm very aware of what that meant. But unfortunately, like my family to this day is just, nope, that's not what happened. That's not what's happening. She's totally fine. She doesn't need any additional help. She doesn't need help. Really, I don't think that she needed like, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, she was different, so she should have been treated differently. I mean it more from the perspective of like, nobody helped her translate, right? Like she was speaking a different language. She was on that different operating system, and nobody helped bridge that gap. Nobody helped her translate. And so she just struggled against all of this. And where she is now is not ideal for any person. And so that sucks. So that's my story. And I don't talk about it often because I don't have insight into how things are going consistently. But that was my experience. That was my experience growing up. And so my answer, to summarize the answer to the question, would just be, I just really wish her differences were acknowledged, and it wasn't made in my family to be believed that like she she's just broken, like Dr. B said. Like that was just, well, she's just broken. This is the way she's going to be. So everybody else, like, let's act like everything she's doing is fine. And all of behavior, like, for example, she would use my toothbrush, and like that would be okay because they wouldn't want her to have a meltdown over saying, hey, don't use somebody else's toothbrush. Like stuff like that would happen in the house. And man, like that sucked. And it like, I just wish that somebody helped bridge that. And looking back, I wish I was one of those people, but for a lot of different reasons, I was not permitted that space with her. Partly because of my relationship with my stepmom, going into the whole thing. But yeah, so that's, sorry, that's a really long answer, but I think I took all of my time from before and I used it now, so there.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing, Marie. And let me tell you something. We are your family now.
You are, I know.
Okay, let's take it to Joelle.
Joelle's the best.
I agree. I married her. She's mine, Hudson.
You scared me into noising. So first of all, there've been a couple kids who were definitely officially diagnosed autistic, who I've been very close to for most of their lives. And that's actually been an interesting experience personally, but I think it's also been helpful for them because their parents aren't autistic or aren't autistic in ways that they can clearly identify for themselves. And so, and I've worked a lot with kids just in general. And I think that was just helpful because I would be able to talk to kids in ways that I wish I could be talked to when I was having like physical experiences or meltdowns or having frustration tolerance issues. And that just seemed very helpful because it did prove to me that like if I had somebody sit down and be like, what are you experiencing right now? Even if they don't have the exact words, they can compare it to something they know, something that they've seen in stories, or if they're into cosplay, they can talk about a character, things like that. And that's another reason why special interests are really important. And I've also worked in a therapy barn where there were kids on the spectrum, and I really enjoyed that. So I've known a lot of kids as an adult, and I was an autistic kid. And what ways can we support them better? I really, really can't stress this enough, that autism is a developmental issue. So yes, autistic adults will be different than non-autistic adults, but also autistic children aren't going to look like an autistic 35-year-old. They're just not. And me at 6 years old, you couldn't necessarily predict that I would be me now. There's just no way. So, like I don't want to do anyone a disservice, but I'm going to say, like, I was kind of a mess and I really could have used way more help. Like, just physically, I didn't understand what my body was doing. Like when I was trying to play with somebody, sometimes I'd hurt them just because I didn't understand and didn't have the same like kind of tactile input that other people do. And I didn't want to hurt anybody. I just didn't know. I also wouldn't understand how loud I was talking. There's just so much that like if somebody had asked me if I knew what I was doing or explained to me, it would have been way better. So, I mean, just asking kids what's going on, asking them if they want to talk, asking them what they're thinking. And also don't assume, like, so nonverbal kids, don't assume they're not communicating. Everything is communication, everything. And that frustrates me too. So just those two things for right now are really important.
Hudson?
I'll go quick. You know, I want to echo what Joelle said. My son Anders is 5 years old. He's just over 4'1" and 65 pounds. And he, low registration was something that was a big challenge for him, that inability to understand how much pressure he was putting on. And he hurt his friends completely unintentionally, and sometimes still does. And I would say the things that I have found seem to help him is I share with him, like, when I was growing up, I was always in trouble. I was always the kid who couldn't sit still. I was always the kid who couldn't follow directions. They didn't work. And so every time he's having a bad day, I tell him about sometime in elementary school or whatever, where that was happening. I also made a point to take my meds with him, so that he sees that that's okay. Like that, whatever it is. And I would say, even if you don't take meds, get a salt pill or do a sugar pill and take it with your kid, so that they know that that's something that's all right. The other thing I would say is, like, at Christmas, I try and talk to Anders about, like, how to express your feelings and, like, how to put those big complex knots into his head, and, like, we tie it to physical sensations and what he wants and all these things. And at Christmas, we watched a movie, like some bullshit Disney Christmas movie thing, and he was going to bed and he said, "Dad, I don't think that Santa's coming for me." And I said, "Why, buddy?" He's like, "Because I hurt my friends a lot, and, like, I'm trying really hard, but I can't control it." And that was like, and so we did. We had people send them letters from Santa, letters from Elf. Anybody who's a good kid, so validate them. Like, they're trying. See them.
All right, so let's take it to Twitter one last time, and then we'll do final thoughts. And of course, we will end with our piggy update, and we'll take it home and announce our next week's guest. So to get that, okay, get off. We'll get there. Okay, so first off, thank you, Chris Murray, for being our live stream producer. This is officially the part where the guest has no clue what's going on. So don't worry, Dr. B. We'll clue you in soon enough. Spider Cat, your friendly neighbor. Okay, so in response to question number 1, says it could help them learn or improve their skills. The person I am thinking of is a good artist and loves learning about history. It also helps them connect with people who have similar interests, and that's totally fine to go out of order. If you're just joining us, that's totally fine. If you're joining us later on the day, later on the week, that's totally fine as well. Just make sure to use the hashtag SPSM and we'll show you some love. Rachel, in response to question number 4, says, I've worked as a child life specialist, helping children cope with hospitalization and medical experiences. That was so valuable in learning how to communicate through some of those barriers to better their experience. And I want to know what this hashtag means, okay? Someone let me know. Misty says, as a teen, I worked at a grocery store alongside a person who was autistic in order to best support them. It's vital to understand their ways of communicating and help them face their challenges while also reinforcing their strengths. Thank you so much, Rachel. Tom Crook says, in response to question number 2, I think we all mask. It just doesn't come naturally to individuals with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. We got to be for others so we can be ourselves. The positive is fitting in. The negative is that we sacrifice our authentic selves. There we go with that hashtag SW5602. I'm obsessed with this now. Spider Cat says, my experience has been good, by the way. I tutored an autistic kid for a while. It was helpful to listen and be patient with them. Jeanette says, continue to develop online resources for families, youth, and providers to give them access to information and community, and that's helps you better support Autistic Youth. Spider Cat says, in response to question number 4, don't support autism. Autism Speaks, which has not a ton of autistic people on their board and doesn't speak for them. Okay, let's get into final thoughts. Dr. B, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, let's talk about really quickly the destructive use of the term normal. I'm a big believer in the idea that normal exists. It's just not what most people think it is. Normal is a statistical term. Normal has no moral value assigned to it. But when we start assigning moral value, such as good or bad, to the concept of normalcy, instead of recognizing something is just out of the realm of what's expected, that's when we start to feel shame about not fitting in. There are plenty of not normal things, abnormal things that are positive, that are amazing. But why do we feel shame as people on the autism spectrum when we are not normal? It's because of that moral imperative associated with that word. So I would just say for everybody out there, give up that moral imperative that normal is good and abnormal is bad. I have a doctorate. It's statistically very much not normal. I think it's a pretty good thing. I'm also on the spectrum, and understanding where I function in ways that are actually beneficial to the people around me because they're not normal, that's also an awesome thing. So let's get rid of the shame and the idea of morality associated with normal.
Now, how can we best connect with you, Dr. B?
Well, you can always check out some articles that we have at takethis.org. By all means, follow Take This on Twitter at takethisorg. If you want to reach me in particular, I am on Twitter at the Dr. B. That's TheeDoctor. B as in boy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know you've had a hard week, so I appreciate you coming on and bringing the fire. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and thank you for being this week's expert guest on SPSM Chat.
Well, thank y'all.
Cool. Final thoughts, Marie?
I have no final thoughts. I've said everything. I love you all. Well, I guess this is a final thought. I love you all so, so much, and I appreciate you all being vulnerable here, and just thank you. Thank you for giving us the space to do this, Rudy.
I feel like we should also have a book update for Marie. I need a graphic. So, Krista, work on that right now, right this second. Is there what are the updates on the book?
The book, it is in Avenel, New Jersey, about, I don't know, like an hour away from me, trying to make its way, copies are trying to make its way over me so that I can send the signed copies out. And you can order it right now at emxiety.com/book. If you're interested in what it is, you can check out emxiety.com. And that's a blog and then a compilation of a lot of the blog posts, most of them, plus 2 exclusive posts can be found in my book and can be pre-ordered on Kindle for March 7th. And you can order the paperback right meow.
What's the name of the book?
Well, that explains it.
It sure does. And what's going to happen when you sell out of all those paperbacks? I'm scared. I haven't got mine yet.
God, just stop. Okay.
Final thoughts, Joelle. Okay. Sorry. Final thoughts. So definitely remember that autism is developmental and that kids are going to develop how they're going to develop. So you don't know what's in store for them. Like, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so just consider that you don't know what they're going to look like in 20 years. And consider that communication isn't always verbal, which is crazy. I don't want to say crazy. It's just quickly, something that confuses me is that people will often emphasize that autistics should pay attention to body language and then disregard nonverbal autistics when they communicate in any way that's not verbal. So just consider everything as communication, even if somebody is not speaking. And also remember that ability and talent and capability is not across the board the same for every single arena in somebody's life. So somebody could be really good at math, but then have difficulty with some things that you would consider basic, like cooking breakfast, which I did for a long time. And also frustration tolerance is a thing, and it can be very painful. And I didn't get a hold of my frustration tolerance until I was in my late 20s. And until that point, being frustrated was very internal and physically painful. I hope I got a lot in there.
Can you make breakfast tomorrow morning, Joelle, please?
No, you do it.
Hudson, final thoughts.
Yes, I would say just quickly, because I also do Piggy update, is if you have, I mean, this is my perspective because I have a kid with some very, he's amazing and he's got special powers, is what I tell him. Take your kids and take them with people who are autistic. show them, like, help them find their people. Like, I got to take my son to Comic-Con with Joel and Rudy, and like, you guys saw him. Like, you made that kid who can't do loud sounds, loud lights, crowds, all those things feel safe. And like, he did it. Like, so to help them, help. I don't know how to say this. I feel like I'm saying it wrong, but I hope the message is coming through.
Hello, animals.
Okay, piggy update. Hamlet was a very naughty boy this week. Hamlet, I was at a meeting, and my Instagram started to blow up. More actually, Hamlet's Instagram started to blow up. This little guy found an Amazon package with 8 tins of Icebreakers watermelon mints, now sponsoring Hamlet, and he ate all of them. It was hysterical. This lady who knows him took video, and like, it was amazing. So that's a piggy update. Hamlet, the watermelon icebreaker pig. Icebreakers, if you're listening, you can sponsor it.
Was he okay? Like, his tum-tum was okay?
Yeah, he got really bloated, and like, you ever seen the videos of hippos when they poop and they wiggle their tail? And
No.
yeah, it was pretty much exactly that. It was really gross, but he was fine.
Dr. B's like, I didn't know it was this kind of show.
It's like everything else is fine, but the poop talk.
But
I'm just worried that you're going to think I'm a different kind of doctor. I've got no opinion on this.
He woke up and just had the like saddest, most like desultory, like, oh, like, it was so sad. Like, but he's good.
All right, so that's going to do it for this week. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching across our multiple platforms. Of course, twitter.com/SPSM Chat. Thank you. I want to give a special shout out to Rachel, who finally got me the answer, who says, we participate, this is for the hashtag SW5602. We participate as part of our class based on recommendations for social work related topics, and hashtag SW5602 helps our professor track our engagement. I hopped on a couple of weeks ago, and these chats are my favorite. Hey, how about that?
That's really awesome.
People
We're
are
educational.
Are yes. I am. Yeah. Okay. I want your professor to see this though. Okay. And still, I want to see if he changes his mind of whether
Give you
or
extra
not.
credit for that alone.
Okay, so next week, our guest, a good personal friend of mine, Noan Wells, who's host of the podcast and community You Meet Empathy, and also he has an upcoming project called the Fuel the Human Collective. It is also National Eating Disorders Awareness Week, and he is in recovery for an eating disorder. We often don't talk about men and how they suffer from eating disorders as well. I know we had a clinician on not too long ago, Katie Gordon, amazing person, but it's awesome to hear from someone with lived experience and has dealt with suicidal intensity. So that'll be awesome. Next Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. I love you all, my SPSM Chat family. I love you all out there in internet land. Until next week, hold your piggies close.